World War I was famously called the war to end all wars. Sadly, it did not live up to that hopeful title. Yet this conflict was unprecedented. It marked the first time in history that countries from across the globe were drawn into a single devastating war. The spark that ignited the conflict was an assassination, but the path to war was paved with a series of complex and often flawed decisions. While it's tempting to assign blame to one nation or individual, the reality is far more complicated. No single party can be held entirely responsible. Could this catastrophic war, which claimed millions of lives, have been avoided? The answer is yes. In this video, we'll unravel the causes behind the Great War, consider how it might have been prevented, and reflect on the lessons history has to teach us to avoid repeating these tragic mistakes. World War I, often called the Great War, lasted from 1914 to 1918 and involved a remarkable number of countries from different regions around the world. What began as a regional conflict in Europe quickly escalated into a truly global war, drawing in nations from Europe, Russia, the United States, and even countries in the Middle East. This broad participation made it one of the largest and most complex conflicts in history up to that point. World War I was fought between two powerful alliances. The Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary with support from the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, and initially Italy, sought to shift the global balance of power. Opposing them were the Allied powers, including Britain, France, Russia, Japan, and later the United States, whose entry gave the Allies a decisive edge. This clash reshaped borders, revolutionized warfare, and set the stage for global politics in the 20th century. But how did a local crisis spiral into a world war? It all began in the Balkans. Tensions between Serbia and Austria-Hungary sparked the conflict, but deeper issues, nationalism, militarism, and a web of alliances, fueled its spread. Serbia, fresh from the Balkan Wars, dreamed of uniting South Slavs under one nation, challenging Austro-Hungarian control. When these ambitions collided with imperial interests, the fuse was lit for a war no one was truly prepared for. Nationalist fervor in the Balkans turned deadly on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary and his wife Sophie were assassinated in Sarajevo. The shooter, Gavrilo Princip, was a Serbian nationalist linked to the radical group known as the Black Hand. This assassination became the spark that ignited World War I. But the world was already on edge. Decades of rising nationalism, tangled alliances, and military posturing had created a powder keg. Could a single assassination really justify a global war? Most historians say no. The deeper causes ran far broader and deeper. Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm II played a key role behind the scenes. His aggressive diplomacy and risk-taking leadership style added fuel to the fire, turning a regional crisis into an unstoppable chain reaction that plunged the world into war. Kaiser Wilhelm II envisioned Germany as Europe's top power, militarily, economically, and politically. He saw Britain and Russia as major threats to that goal, and was determined not to let Germany be outshined. To secure his ambitions, Wilhelm backed Austria-Hungary and fully understood the risks. War with Serbia would likely pull in Russia, Serbia's ally, followed by France, Russia's partner, setting off a chain reaction across Europe. But why would Wilhelm gamble with global war? What drove him to risk so much? To answer that, we need to look deeper into his motives and Germany's growing desire for dominance on the world stage. In a critical move, Kaiser Wilhelm II gave Austria-Hungary a blank check, a promise of unconditional German support against Serbia. With Germany's backing, Austria-Hungary felt empowered to act boldly. They issued Serbia an ultimatum so harsh it was nearly impossible to accept without surrendering national sovereignty. Serbia's partial rejection gave Austria-Hungary the excuse it needed to declare war. What began as a local crisis now had the backing of Europe's major powers, and the countdown to a world war had officially begun. But this was just the first domino to fall. Austria-Hungary and Germany's actions made one thing clear: they were gearing up for war. Their aggressive stance, even when diplomacy was still an option, helped ignite the conflict. But were they the only ones at fault? To understand the full picture, we need to examine the other side. The Triple Entente, an alliance between Britain, France, and Russia. These powers had their own agendas, rivalries, and reasons to view war as a strategic opportunity. Could the Allies have seen the conflict as a chance to shift the balance of power in their favor? Were miscalculations, or even hidden motives, pushing all sides toward the edge? Let's take a closer look at the Triple Entente's role in the road to war. Russia was a massive military power. But why was it so quick to jump into war against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy? On the surface, it was about protecting Serbia, a fellow Slavic nation. But the truth is more complex. Russia's rapid mobilization and lack of diplomatic effort suggest that defending Serbia may have been a pretext. Instead of de-escalating, Russia moved swiftly toward war, hinting at deeper motives. Was this really about loyalty, or was Russia seizing a chance to assert dominance in the Balkans and push back against German and Austro-Hungarian influence? Their actions suggest ambition, not just alliance. One often overlooked fact: Russia, not Germany, was the first to mobilize its military. While claiming to defend Serbia, Russia may have viewed the crisis as a chance to reassert power in Eastern Europe. But Russia wasn't alone in quiet preparation. France, though publicly cautious, was secretly coordinating with allies, especially Russia, and readying itself for war. Could France have seen the conflict as a chance to reclaim lost territory like Alsace-Lorraine? Beneath the surface, diplomacy gave way to strategy, and silent ambitions shaped the march toward war. France's role before World War I may have been more influential than it appears. Some historians believe it was French encouragement, not just Slavic loyalty, that pushed Russia toward war. Behind closed doors, France offered Russia its own blank check, financial and military backing if it stood firm against the Central Powers. But this wasn't just about support, it was strategy. France hoped Russia would help reshape Central and Eastern Europe in ways that served French interests. By quietly fueling Russia's military build-up, France aimed to weaken Germany and Austria-Hungary without being the first to act. On the surface, France appeared cautious, but behind the scenes it may have been guiding the path to war. France was uneasy about sharing a border with a growing German power. Strategically, French leaders hoped Germany would be tied up fighting Russia in the east, giving France an opening in the west. But Germany struck both fronts at once, derailing those plans. While France's behind-the-scenes moves were significant, Britain's actions may have been even more surprising. and just as decisive. At the height of its empire, Britain saw Germany's rapid rise as a direct threat to its naval dominance and global influence. War wasn't Britain's first choice, but with two great powers on a collision course, many British leaders saw conflict as the only way to protect their empire's future. For Britain's leaders, losing global dominance to Germany was unacceptable. Instead of mediating as it had in the Balkan Wars, Britain stayed on the sidelines and may have even encouraged Russian boldness. Their focus was less on peace and more on containing Germany's rise. Britain believed the more Germany got entangled in conflict, the weaker it would become. Though Britain dominated the seas by 1910, Germany's growth fueled deep anxiety. Had Britain wanted to avoid war, it could have acted diplomatically, but its inaction suggests it saw conflict as an inevitable and perhaps useful means to curb Germany's power. History is often written by the victors, and for World War I, blame usually falls on Austria-Hungary and Germany. But what if the story were different? Would the blame shift? The Triple Entente, Britain, France, and Russia, were far from innocent. And the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, weren't simply the aggressors. The truth is more complex. Take Austria-Hungary. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was just the spark. The empire had long aimed to expand, especially targeting Serbia. With tensions rising and Germany's backing, Austria-Hungary used the assassination as an excuse to push for territorial gain. On July 23, 1914, Austria-Hungary issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia, demanding control over the assassination investigation on Serbian soil and a crackdown on anti-Austrian groups, all within 48 hours. The demands were intentionally impossible to accept. After delivering the ultimatum, Austria-Hungary's ambassador left immediately, expecting Serbia's rejection. This wasn't a real negotiation, but a calculated move to blame Serbia and justify war, making it seem Serbia had chosen conflict. By rejecting the ultimatum, Serbia was painted as the aggressor, but Austria-Hungary was the real instigator. Their harsh demands masked a bigger goal: expanding influence in the Balkans. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the perfect excuse for war, a cause most historians now see as unjustified. Austria-Hungary couldn't act alone. Germany's unconditional blank check of support gave them the confidence and means to attack Serbia. Though Germany didn't fire the first shot, its backing made the war possible, and many blame it as the primary culprit for the conflict. Germany was playing a risky strategic game. Knowing a conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia would pull in Russia and France, German leaders encouraged aggressive moves in the Balkans to provoke Russia's mobilization. This would give Germany a justified reason to start war on its own terms, while seeming like a reluctant responder. Behind this was a deep fear of decline. By the early 1900s, Germany had peaked economically and militarily, but leaders, especially Kaiser Wilhelm II, believed war was necessary to secure Germany's future supremacy. For Wilhelm, diplomacy was weakness, war was destiny. With such a determined leader, a large-scale conflict became almost inevitable. World War I wasn't caused by a single nation or decision. It was a tangled web of ambitions, alliances, and miscalculations. If Europe's leaders had chosen diplomacy over aggression, this devastating war might have been avoided. The war wasn't inevitable. It was the result of risky choices and the dangerous idea that conflict could bring glory. Sadly, this same mindset set the stage for another world war just 20 years later. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's much more history to explore here on History Simplified.